Dear friends, in this tutorial we are going to cover a very powerful feature of pytest framework called fixtures. Okay, what I have here is a sample database class. This is just a fake or a mock class I have created for demonstrating fixtures. But if you're using any real Python module for, let's say, Oracle or SQL database, it will have all these basic functionality. It will have your database object, it will have your connection, and then the third thing will be cursor. So cursor will have an ability to execute your database queries. Here I have put some fixed database queries and returning some fixed values here. So again, this is all fake. Okay, now when I start writing the test here, I want to write two kind of tests. So first test is to verify John's employee ID, and the other one is to verify Tom's employee ID. So this database is basically a employee database, and all I'm doing is verifying IDs of different employees, and I'm writing unit test for them. So first let's write unit test for John. I will say test John's ID here, and in order to create the database object, I will call mydb. This will give me the database object, and in database, first, if you have some idea on how databases work, then you always need to connect to your server, database server. Now I'm just saying server, but this will be appropriate connection string. Okay, and once you have your connection, you will have a cursor object next. So connection.cursor will give you a cursor object, and cursor.execute will be able to execute your SQL query. Here I'm going to copy the query from this class. Select ID from employee DB where name is equal to John. This returns me the ID of employee John, and let's say this is ID. You want to assert that ID is 123. I think so. ID here is 123. So I just want to assert that. Similarly, you can write another test case for Tom's ID. I'm just going to quickly change these things, and 789, that's your Tom's ID. Okay, so if you have seen my pytest tutorials before this tutorial, then you know this is how you write your test. It should have test underscore prefix, and the file name should also have test underscore. When you run this test using pytest -v command, it runs fine. It will say the test passed. Okay, now what's the problem with this approach? You can see that here there are two main issues. One issue is you are repeating all these lines of code here, you see. So if you have, let's say, 1000 test cases, you will be writing these 3 lines like 1000 times. Okay, which is not good. Second thing is database connection is costly. You could be even writing test cases requiring network connection, and those things are also costly. So it's a costly operation which you are performing on running each and every test. So again, if you have 1000 test cases, it's gonna take some time and waste some resources. There has to be a better way of doing this. In classic X unit style, you will use a setup and tear down concept. So what setup and tear down does is it will initialize whatever you need for your test cases in the beginning. So first let me use setup and tear down, and then I will show you how you can use fixtures instead of setup and tear down, because fixture is much better than traditional X unit style setup and tear down. First, I'm going to make my connection and cursor object global. I'll say these are global, and write down a setup module method. So this is a setup at module level, and you are just initializing your connection and cursor object here. So you will say global connection and cursor is also global. Now this test has this cursor available, so it can directly use it. So you can get rid of all these lines. There is also a tear down method. So let me write that down. Tear down module. Now what tear down means is, after test cases have finished execution, you want to do some cleanup. So you will do cursor close first and then connection close. Okay, so I didn't show those methods earlier, but I also have these close methods here which I want to call. Okay, so basically whatever your test cases need, you are initializing that in your setup module, and then once you are done executing these, you will tear down. Tear down meaning you will close the connection and do necessary cleanup. All right, let's run this. Cool, so you can see both the tests passed, it worked as expected. So now this is better. You solve the two issues that I mentioned, and those issues was repeating the same line of code and calling costly database connection every time. Now you can do this exact same thing of setting up and tear down using pytest fixtures. So let me show you how to use pytest fixtures. So I'm going to first remove these globals are not needed, and import pytest module, and then write down my fixture. So I'll say pytest.fixture. Okay, and what you need in each of these tests is really the cursor. Okay, so all right, let me just make a space here. Okay, so what you need is a cursor. So here I can say cursor, and then I'm just going to copy this code here. Okay, so you create your database, you connect to your database, and then you have your cursor, and you will just return the cursor here. Okay, now see what happens when you return this, when you use this fixture. So in order to use this fixture in your test cases, let me just remove all of this. All you will do is call cursor here. So what happens is, when cursor is passed here, the pytest framework will realize that there is a cursor function which is a fixture. So it's gonna call this function and return this object here, right here. Okay, so that's what it's gonna do. And just to make it clear, this cursor and this curve function is same as this. It was not this. Okay, so I just changed the variable name. So this guy here is same as here. Okay, let's run this test and see what happens. Okay, clear. Cool, so it worked. See, it passed all those tests. Okay, so this is better because you don't have to create those global variables, and also this concept aligns with your dependency injection concept. If you have done like Java programming, you might have heard this term dependency injection. So what I'm doing here is, this test has a dependency on cursor, and I'm injecting the dependency using this particular fixture. All right, now when you run these tests, you have to, after you are done executing these, you have to do connection close as well. So for doing connection close, what you have to do is you have to use a yield function. So first, before I do that, let me show you by printing that it is doing whatever we expect it to do. So I will say setting up here, and yeah, let me just do this first. Okay, so when you run this test here, alright, it's not printing the statement because in order to print it, you have to supply minus minus capture option, and you have to say no. No means don't capture the output of print statement somewhere else, but show it on std out. So here you can see that it is printing setting up twice. So it is calling setting up, then it is running the test, again calling setting up, and then running the test, meaning it is not doing whatever we expect. It is actually creating these database object every time you call them here. So to restrict that, at a module level, you can use this scope parameter, and when you say scope is equal to module, it will set up only once. So now when you do that, you can see setting up is just one time. Okay, now this output, this is more visible if you don't use minus v. So you can see it is setting up. These two dot means it is running two tests, and that's it. Okay, now how do you do tear down? Tear down means where do you close your connection and cursor. Okay, so for that you have to return you just change a return with yield, and after this you will say cursor dot close and then connection close. So what will happen is it will create this cursor object only once. It will pass it to all the test cases, execute the test cases. After all of that is over, it will go here and close the connection. And let me show you, let me print this closing database. Okay, so let's run this. Nice. So you can see that it set up the things that we needed to run the test. This two dot means it ran those two test cases, and then it is closing the database. Okay, so that was all about fixtures in pytest framework. They are pretty powerful. They are recommended over using setup and tear down methods because they are much better than setup and tear down. So whenever you write pytest based unit test, please use these fixtures. All right, thank you for watching.